Why don't we just turn it right over to John and to Mary? And
Yep. Great, thank you. First of all, I'd like to recognize Dr. Goldston, who is in the audience tonight. And welcome her. And if that doesn't go well tonight, I will ask her to sit here.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So just as a brief introduction for tonight, you're going to hear presentations tonight and Wednesday as well that include recommendations to, number one, meet the needs of students. Number two, to bring greater coherence to our services in an effort to reduce redundancy. Number three, it's their attempt to find efficiencies and also effectiveness for what we do for our students. And four, they are mindful of the need for sustainability because it's not only this year, but the longer-term perspective that we are taking. You're going to hear recommendations that on the surface appear to be cuts. To be clear, we are proposing no cuts in services to our students. We may be proposing changes in the way those services are delivered, but not reductions. Hopefully, you'll see only improvements. Also, these, what appear to be cuts, are not budget-driven. We, the city and the taxpayers, have been so generous in providing the district growth of 5% year after year. And by the way, that's extremely rare in school budgeting today. And I really applaud the city and of course the taxpayers who support that. But it's especially plaudable that it's at a time when enrollment is flat. The recommendations are driven by an awareness that the 5% is generous, but we also know that it's limited. We can't continue to blow up the balloon by continuing to add, because we know what happens when the balloon exceeds its capacity. So we understand that it's limited, but we also understand that there are new needs that come up every year, either through an analysis of our data, and we're more apt to find problems that we have to address or issues that we want to address. Or we identify new needs of students that are coming in our classroom doors. We think that what you're going to hear over the course of these 2 nights is a plan that is right-sizing. It's a plan that is budget targeting. And for example, we remain committed to our class size commitment or guidelines. And you will see over the course of the next 2 days, or the next 2 meetings, where we are continuing to staff at that level. I want to also thank, as we move on into the presentations tonight, I want to thank everybody who has been involved with this budget development process. As you know, we've kind of changed our approach. The principals, the coordinators, the directors, central administration, and especially Mary DeLay, really have made a commitment to work together to help understand as a team what we're all going through. They've made commitments to take one for the team at times, and they've been exceptional in helping us do what I just talked about earlier in meeting those needs. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to work with this group as they collaborated and honored our sense of team. So you know what the Biden quote is that we've been using throughout this process. So I hope you'll agree when you hear the plans tonight and also on Wednesday night that the plan not only shows how we will expend our funds, but why we're expending them in such a way, and the outcomes that we intend to achieve, and a perspective on our primary value, and that is the future success of every student. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to get the party started and start to look at our district curriculum.
Thank you. I can't say enough thanks to all of the lots of people in this audience because it was the culmination of collaborative and iterative efforts on behalf of the curriculum coordinators, the principals, led by Mary and John, to get to this point. And our focus of the curricular budget goals, tonight I'm going to present elementary, secondary, and then district-wide, and then I'm going to illustrate those budget goals in how we expand upon and ensure that we have cohesive professional development next year. So that's sort of the agenda. The curriculum, these are the folks, that are involved. The budget drivers. First off are the basic every year contractual step and COLA, salary increases for non-representative employees. And what I'm going to speak to in a couple of minutes and show some data of why we want this is an addition of a data and assessment specialist district-wide to help develop capacity and support improvements to data-informed instructional practices. And we're going to show you a little bit about that. And also the addition of an elementary math specialist to provide job-embedded coaching, interventions, and professional development for high-quality math instruction. And I'll show you some data that shows the need for more intensive action in terms of math. And then finally, increased funding for professional development to support staff and deliver high-quality professional development tied to student outcomes. So the elementary budget goals, I'm sorry, it's hard to see here. Do you think that we're all here, if we could shut that other light? I think it would help a lot. Is that better? Yeah. It's a little seance, but so the elementary budget goals. So let's see if I can use this new little toy here. All right, there we go. So math and science. I have Elizabeth here, and I'm going to start to say it, but she's really done an outstanding job envisioning this, and we recently visited Gloucester, who does Math in Focus the same as us, just to get some ideas, and we learned a lot about their math leadership team. So one of the budget goals for the elementary is a building teacher leadership by having interested and accomplished teachers become part of the development of professional development and coaching at the school level. So the cost of that is $36,000 split across the 3 elementary schools. So you would have 1 or 2 at each grade level, and I'm just going to go through all these, and then I'm going to that relate to you. And then K through 5 math professional development, $30,000 is to provide training for Math in Focus. So this is our 3rd year on it, and 3 years ago when they adopted Math in Focus, there were 2 sessions for professional development, from what I understand, and none since. So any new teacher that has come along is trying to do a great job, but with little support. So that's going to be a major focus for us next year. And in this presentation tonight, what we're also trying to provide folks is the historical perspective, because some of us are new in central office, so that was important for us to get. So if you have questions on that. And then the 3rd one under K Math and Science, K5, is a math specialist. This one is, again, what was on the slide prior, job embedded, which is most importantly, we envision that this person would be housed at one of the 3 elementary schools where we can find space, so that's not over here in district office, but it's really living and breathing on the front line. And I'm going to let Elizabeth sort of elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you. So we spent I spent the year and with principals and with Teresa really looking at what's going on with math, because as Teresa said, it kind of hadn't been really focused on, learn the pun, with Math in Focus for a while, since we had implemented it. And I also spent the time so far looking at other districts, and particularly districts that have Math in Focus, and learning about what they're doing, in particular Waltham and Gloucester Public Schools. What I've learned is that they have quite a bit of teacher math leadership in both places. In particular, they've spent time developing their own scope and sequence and moving some things around with Math in Focus. And what I've learned from all these districts is you kind of do have to be a little bit of a critical consumer with Math in Focus. So that's, you don't see that there, but that's part of the plan with the leadership team. The other common thing that I've noticed in my looking at other districts and also spending time with the EDCO district math coordinators is that math specialists are a common position. So the idea of a math specialist is that they do a couple of things. They do coaching in the classroom with the teachers, and they also go out and get some great PD. It might not be Math in Focus PD, it might be other professional development. I've learned a lot about some really great PD you can send people out to and bring back, and bring that PD back and really run professional development. And then the other part of their job is intervening with students. So this year, in all 3 elementary schools, they've really identified a need to do some Tier 2 intervention with students. And that is something that would be a part of this person's job, much like our reading specialists provide intervention for students that need it using the LLI program. We would also be doing this as well. So it's a coaching piece and also just working with students. The math leadership team, I do want to go back to that because I think that's a really exciting opportunity for our teachers. We watched a team in Gloucester sit in a room, a whole 2nd grade team, and really look at assessment questions in Math in Focus, talk about every single chapter, and it was an amazing thing to see. And they had math teacher leaders at every grade level in every building. The math teacher leaders also came, and we got the opportunity to ask them some questions, and it really helped. Teachers felt really supported by their peers. If it was, sometimes the math teacher leader would, hang around after school and say, hey, I'm going to be here and help you with the online component of Math in Focus. Or let's look at the assessment data together. Or, the role really evolved. I do think this, you see a lot of money up here for math. I think now is the time because we have not really focused on it in the past few years, and teachers are ready for it, and it's necessary. It will improve our student achievement. Any questions?
Yeah, can I ask? And maybe because the video is on, if we can put the lights back on in between.
Oh, that's right.
And so we have to stay awake. Challenge. Would it be within a coach's role to help do any kind of additional challenge across the 3 schools, or would that be your role, or?
So I will say this year I have I have quite a few student groups I'm actually doing. It's been a challenge to do K-5 math and science, but trying it out, and I do have a couple challenge groups. And I think that it would be the role, I think the interventionist, the math specialist, I think how I could envision them helping is they're really, this person would have a math degree most likely and really understand math, so they could design these challenge opportunities and help teachers, because I think it's hard for teachers sometimes to figure out what to do with these children. So I envision the math specialist saying, here's these opportunities for challenge. I have been putting those things out to some teachers, but almost designing that, and then maybe taking those groups, but also building capacity for the teachers to do that as well, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the features of the math specialists and then the math teacher leaders is developing an opportunity for teachers to model lessons. And so peer observation opportunities to share the wealth. Because it's hard to see what goes on in other classrooms when you're an elementary teacher especially.
Right.
So we were talking about how it shows great growth in teachers, and it's such a collaboration that teachers appreciate being able to go to each other's classrooms. So model classrooms, model units, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I know the challenge piece is something that is on a lot of people's mind in attending to math in general. I think that's within there too.
So how about if I wait on world language and literacy for a minute and show you a little bit of data on the math and why we're saying this. All right, so just for folks, again, 3 years ago it was adopted. It's a Singapore math curriculum. It's hard to learn at first to teach, and that's why we need the professional development. It's not the ordinary way. And as I said there, it was limited to the 2 sessions, and that was in the year. So let's see if I can do this properly. Oh, that's you. So this is the park data from last year, just a quick glance at it. It was presented at a school committee meeting earlier this year. Uh-oh, let's wait. And it will just show you the need for attention to it. And as when we all came here this year, one thing we noticed that was very obvious is it's an extremely dedicated staff, dedicated to students, dedicated to the culture of the school. But what seems to be missing is the organizational structure, the bigger picture view, the consistency and cohesiveness that, people have been left to their own a little bit. And so, our job is to make sure they have adequate curriculum and instructional tools. So this is an example here of one of the elementary schools. And it's in pink here, although it's difficult to see up on that slide. There's a achievement gap, which this isn't new to all of you, but any of the pink areas are showing that achievement gap. So let's start in the left column under ELA. Even though we're looking at math, I just want to show you something. So between all students and high need students, there's a 20-point discrepancy. So that's an area that's an achievement gap, 20 points or more. Drop down to students with disabilities under English Language Arts. And 18% of students with disabilities achieved in the top two, which is proficient or advanced, it's 4 or 5 on the park, as compared with the overall 60%. Go over to the math in the right column. Similarly, 18% with students with this, let's see if I can use this thing, students with disabilities, and then 57%. As you can see, I think every number on the right is lower, is lower than the ELA for student achievement on this measure. And again, this is only one measure. More importantly is what happens in the classroom and the formative assessments, and teachers know their kids best. But this is one that we do get judged on, and we get federal funds on, and it's compared. So this is more about, to me, curriculum and instruction. How are we delivering? It's less about one student. Similarly, Hosmer, same type of thing. Students with disabilities are 20, ELL students are 23 in ELA, and high needs are 29 compared to the 50 at the top, and similarly in math. So those areas, those pink areas, are areas that we need to focus on, and if you focus on those areas, obviously the overall increases. Finally, Lowell, similar kind of situation. If you look at math in Lowell, 63 for all, but for high needs students, 36% of them achieved in the proficient or advanced category. And 20% of students with disabilities. So, yeah, might as well click on that. You know what, I'll tell you about it, you don't even have to look at it because Mary didn't sign up. So we gave a survey out to all of the elementary teachers, and it was 90-something% of teachers completed it. And we asked them, just, what are you teaching? What do you use? What are your needs? And it demonstrated a lot of things, but one of which was the need for more professional development in math and focus. So I'm going to go back up to elementary. Any other questions on math right now before we go to LESS and literacy?
I just have one, particularly with your site visits, other parent components, are they doing anything with parents?
Yep, so in Waltham, I went to an amazing parent math night, and it wasn't a math and focus night, even though they do use pieces of math and focus. It was a parent math event. We did the growing staircase problem, we did some things, and we learned a lot about how our students are going to be learning math. Gloucester did Math and Focus's Parent University, which I have in the budget, and I spoke to them about that, and they said it was good to do once, but they actually want to do their own sort of homegrown math parent event. I have in my plans next year to do one with me, at least, in the beginning of the year, maybe at the middle school auditorium with everybody, but we do have in the budget to do the Singapore Math Parent University. And so that is something, those are two things that I don't think parents have had any opportunities like that. I think the other piece we want to really get going, and I'm working with Tony Carlson, is having students have access to the online component through Think Central, and so parents can go in there as well. We're actually close to being able to launch that very soon. we're working with the IT department on that, and that's something that we could have done long ago, but now that we're attending to it. So having parent nights, having, parent-only nights with me or with Math and Focus, and then also making sure they have online access and know how to navigate it.
Yeah, and I guess just thinking with the achievement gap, just with the high needs groups, there's always a certain amount of people that are going to come to the math night type of thing, but that ongoing partnership with parents so that the higher needs families are not being left behind.
Right, and I do think we do a better job with literacy, we help parents, spend a lot of time on figuring out just right books, and I agree, we haven't necessarily done that with math, and so I will work with principals and with the teachers, especially the teacher leaders, to help with that. I think that's a great idea.
Are there some supplemental tools you're looking at too? Because I know I've talked to other people about Math and Focus, and they have recommended supplementing with other.
So I have seen many districts, actually in my EDCO group, which is math coordinators, they said nobody is using just one thing, no matter what their curriculum is. So by us creating our own scope and sequence, there are some problematic grade levels where there are fifth grade standards being taught in the Math and Focus in fourth grade. So by creating our own scope and sequence, which that work will start this summer, and moving some things around and looking vertically, there is where you kind of identify gaps in the standards that you need to bring things in. So we've looked at Engage New York or Eureka Math, Jan Richardson in younger grades. Teachers have used that in the past in K and 1. There's a bunch of things we could use that come at no cost. So I think the idea is we need to first identify where those gaps are, which is why we need all this math professional development time. Yeah.
And how long will the scope and sequence take? Like, how long is that process?
So what we saw in, I have documents from other districts. The math coaches have been so kind to share them with me. So we have 2 Math and Focus school districts with their scope and sequences. So we have those to start with. But I hope to have a draft in the summer, and so we start in the fall. It won't be something that I don't think we can wait around for, if that makes sense.
Good, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. In the world language, Adam is here. And we've also discussed this at a former school committee meeting a little bit more in depth, but in order to move this from kindergarten to grade 1 next year, we need to hire a new teacher. So to implement this multi-year process at the 3 middle schools. And I'm not sure what kind of questions, but Adam can give you any more detail. I know we've talked about it a lot at school committee meeting, but I didn't know. If nothing, he's just here with a nice smile. We'll move on to literacy. That's a big gap, right?
Thank you.
Nice job.
Well done, well done.
So, Dari, Elizabeth and I have been working a lot on looking at auditing, if you will, K through 5 literacy. And so there's a chunk of money, as you can see here, to move foundations from grade 1 training to grade 2. And then also for the writing component to make sure that all 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers have the materials and training on that in the school versus being sent out. So there are folks that are actually coming from both of those companies to the school for 4 days, things like that next year. And if we go to, some signs after. Okay, reading, start that. So in back in 2015, before we arrived, there was a goal that was established, and the goal reads, general education students, with an asterisk, enrolled at any time and consistently in attendance for 3 consecutive school years will achieve grade level proficiency by the end of that period as measured by ongoing district-determined monitoring available. So this goal was set up, and so the asterisk, though, an important asterisk here is students receiving ESL services and/or students identified with a disability that impacts learning have their own individual goals, so they aren't included in that general education goal. So then last year, you don't have to read these, but they're online if you really want detail. 4 metrics were used, it started last year in K through 5, and they were to measure at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year to see what growth occurred or didn't occur in phonics, reading, comprehension, and writing. So they used these 4 metrics. It was last year K through 5, and it was this year they're using it 6 through 8 for those students who are in the reading classes. And the district baseline data from June that has taken the literacy specialists months to take together and present this shows all students in the top row. There's 1,007 students, 1 through 5. 923 of those had complete data, meaning all 4 metrics were on there. 30% met the benchmark for their grade level. 33% were approaching grade level, which means 1 or more of the metrics was off. And then 38% overall were at risk, meaning missed 2 or more of their benchmarks. The goal students, which again is not the ESL students and not the students with a disability who have individual plans, 600 of those students, that's the N, 39% met the benchmark, 38% were approaching, and 23% are at risk. So, one thing to keep in mind, it's something that we've been discussing as curriculum coordinators all year, is that Tier 1 instruction is the most important thing. If you think of a triangle, all students get Tier 1 instruction no matter what program they're in, what language they speak, what disability they have. You need a rigorous, quality core instruction. So the definition, the book definition, high quality is defined as at least 80% of the students in the classroom or grade level are performing at or above grade-wide academic screening benchmarks. In the data I showed you here, we don't have 80%. So then we have to say, as curriculum coordinators and principals, what does that mean? Well, again, if you look up there, student participants grade 1 through 5, and I'm just reiterating, 39% of those students met expectations versus the goal students, 47% met expectations. That's not near the 80% that is the common agreement upon scholars. So then our question becomes, is this student achievement problem or curriculum and instruction problem? What we believe is, from the data, the student data indicate that there's an achievement issue across the district, across all populations, as those former charts showed you with the pink zones. However, the consistently low achievement in phonics indicates that the district does not deliver curriculum instruction adequately to provide students with important foundational skills in a systematic sequential order. Therefore, we're focusing on designing cohesive, standards-based curriculum supported by core instructional programs, which started with auditing what is. So, this year, K1 teachers had training on foundations started in the summer and then more during the school year at 2 of the 3 elementary and then finally at the end, the 3rd elementary. That will address the achievement gap directly. It's targeting phonics, and because you had inquired earlier at a meeting, the improvement expected in phonics should benefit overall reading achievement of all students and be demonstrated in the outcomes measured by those 4 data points on the other slide, state assessments, in addition to the ongoing formative assessment that teachers are doing in their classroom every day. That's one thing that we're using. And let me reiterate that. When we look at that question, is a student achievement problem or curriculum instruction, obviously one causes the other. It's almost like a cycle. But it's very clear to us that from the curriculum survey we did, there are lots of different programs, books that teachers are using, what was in their classroom when they arrived and they're a brand new teacher, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to show you a slide in a minute on that. So what we need is to decide what is the best practice, what is the best resource for our students and our group. So that's the next step. This is one example of one of the questions on the curriculum survey we did with the staff at the elementary level. It says, please briefly describe your program and instructional practices in teaching writing. And many of them reported a homegrown approach, which means they're working hard at trying to look at these standards and pick from whatever is there to teach those standards. Most reported incorporating one or more of the following: the workshop model, Lucy Calkins, talking, drawing, writing, etc. You can see there's a long list of things. But what that shows you is there's a variety, right? And so some of those are probably better than others. So what we need to do is figure out which ones are from the teacher's vantage point. So we need a cadre of teachers to help us figure this out. So if we talk elementary writing, one of the things that teachers more commonly in the upper grades 3, 4, and 5 talked about was using empowering writing. The beauty of empowering writing is that you use it in your literacy block, but you also use it for literacy in the content areas. So if you're writing social studies or science, you're still using that same form. And so it's very versatile. So previously, it was optional for teachers to participate in using this. We confirmed it with the spring faculty curriculum surveys. And whatever, that's okay. Presently, K-2, empowering writing is optional this year, but we're going to review that at an upcoming literacy conference that we're going to at the end of the month. Some use in K-2 writers' workshops, some Lucy Calkins unit to study, etc. So the word optional, we're going to change after we get total vetting, total feedback from teachers, and have a literacy team that I'm going to give you on the next slide. And they won't be optional because they'll be what is the best methods for teaching the components of literacy. So next step, this year, what we've all been working on is on the left side of this, the ELA frameworks, benchmarks, standards of behavior, social studies practices, curriculum survey results, reading assessment calendar, math and science frameworks, etc. This is all being pulled together. When I arrived, I said, so where are the curriculum maps? And people were like, well, I have one from 2 years ago, and I have, so we decided, let's cull it all, pull it together, and Dari and Elizabeth have done a good job. We meet every week, and they show me more and more. So we're going to unveil this to teachers in April. We're going to vet it with the faculty and make final edits to all of these benchmarks and frameworks that we're working with. And they'll be updated annually after we reflect on it at the end of the year, because it's fluid. It's always needs to be updated. Then also in the spring of 2017, we'll distribute all of these to all the K-5 faculty. In the summer, we're going to design and upload to the new Teaching and Learning webpage all of these. So if parents want to know in first grade, what is my child doing for reading, what are the standards, all of that, we're going to have it in a nicely formatted, to be determined webpage. And also, very importantly, annually train new faculty members. Deb Munger and I are meeting to talk about how to help mentor teachers on academics and instruction when they come to the district. She does a great job meeting with them monthly. But like I said, you start that day and you've got your kids in front of you, and whatever book is on the shelf you're trying to work with. So we are going to make sure that teachers get training. And part of the math teacher leadership is going to be a part of that too, because those math teacher leaders would be training those teachers. You'll see later, and I'm not sure if it's in this one or if it's in the one on Wednesday night, that we put money in the budget, $10,000 for more mentoring, and that's to have more one-on-one mentors rather than having a middle school teacher mentoring maybe an elementary, or we want to have it much more close to where they're coming from. So, let's see. Okay, another next steps next week. Dr. Nani Lusso, who worked with the middle school last year, and Kelly Hulsred are both from Harvard, and they are reading specialists. Lots of ESL work as well. Yvonne and I met with them, and we have a team of the folks that are down here representing the 3 elementary schools, reading specialists, ESL coordinator, special education coordinator, school principal, and myself, that are going for 3 full days to Cambridge next week. And in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically taking all of the information that we've audited this year and streamlining what's in place, what needs cohesion. The first day of it, they're using all of the research-based data to help us decide what we might do. And the third day of it is to articulate it in writing, where are we at. Then we come back to the district. We meet with all the teachers, K through 5, in our Hosmer cafeteria that we've been doing, and we go through this kind of stuff so that next year
we'll start with something that is not optional, that is something that works for the various parts, and then again, evaluate it at the end of the year. Did that work? Did it not? Do we need to tweak this, start something new? So there's a lot of work to be done, but I have to tell you, we had a conference call today with them, and like half of the group was there today, and when we got off the phone, you kind of took a deep breath, because you're like, this is a lot of work, you know, like one of those, like, it's not these easy, like you go, come away, and you've got this package deal. It's a lot of work, but it's very exciting. Mina, where's Mina? She's here. And Mina, what did you say, one of your teachers that came back?
One of my multi-age teachers, the second grade teacher in a 2-3 multi-age classroom came back. She came into my office and she said, it's going to be a lot of work, but I came back because I'm so excited about attending and participating, so thank you.
Which was so nice to hear, because it is a lot of work, you know. So that's a next step. Oh, we don't want to go to that yet. Yeah, I did all the elementary. Oh, I know. Bear with me 1 minute. So let's go back up to secondary. Any questions while I'm thumbing through this stuff?
Yeah, so.
Really?
So the math and the science, the PARC and the MCAS, you know, I'm very familiar with that. So, you know, it's not, you know, I think everything we've talked about, we've got some good plans to go in the right direction. I have to say with the baseline, the data on the literacy, the benchmarking literacy, we're a lot further behind than I had any realization that we're this far behind. You know, less than a third of kids at benchmark. That's sobering. So I think it goes back to the time investment, the financial investment, the grade, the sort of grade area of focus. And so I guess the question for the experts is, can we really be having the world language when we're not having the reading? Can we fit another thing in time-wise, coaching-wise, financially, all of these different things?
There's never enough time or money, right? I think there's competing interests, certainly, and great value in all. And I think it's up to the school committee, influenced by the teachers, the principals, to make those decisions. You know, we make recommendations, and that's what, you know, we're doing here. And we're fitting in, you know, PLES and literacy focus and math focus next year. But over time, I think you do have to decide that. I mean, those are conversations maybe even with principals on Wednesday night, because I know they struggle with schedules, trying to you know, balance schedules and fit it all into. But there's great reward, and you know, research shows what happens when students learn foreign language at a younger age as well. So kind of a
Yeah, and there's no debate about that at all. It's about, okay, so we are not where we need to be in literacy, in the basics of literacy. We're not where we need to be in the math and science. If we're putting all these investments in, how long is it going to take us to get us where, you know, on a better path? You know, I think with achievement gap, we always talk about reducing the achievement gap, but we're also trying to prevent it from getting worse. And, you know, we know it's going to get worse and worse unless we're really digging into it. So it means that every investment of time and resources really matters. So, I mean, it's obviously, as you know, something I think a lot about, because I want to help, you know, ask the right questions to put us in the right direction. But I really struggle with that because, like I said, we're further behind in the literacy than I
A couple of things to think about data. So if last year was the first year that they implemented this beginning of school, end of school, and some teachers use parts of the maze or parts of others during the year, but it's not a consistent thing. So say beginning and end. It's only the first year of that, so there's, you know, that's a growing thing too. I wouldn't rely on only that. You know, you need to. So one of the discussions we've had today at one of our meetings was next year curriculum committees. What is needed, what will be.
Of course, social emotional learning is one of them, but another one of them with this data specialist, a part of with the curriculum coordinators is data management assessment system. You know, one school uses math, two don't have one. That's the kind of thing that can quickly and easily show growth of students, who needs tier 2, all of that kind of stuff. So we don't have that right now. A lot of districts do have that. So that's something next year we'll study to figure out what's best, what can get teachers easy data quickly, so that we can use it right away. And use that, to me, is the better marker of the growth of the students in all of these skills. So that's something we right now we're developing like John always does, these interrelated chart to show like next year. So if we have a paid after school PD curriculum committees, and one of them is this data management team, well, we're also going to have the school-based, school standards-based report card, excuse me, and that's assessment too. So how do these tie in? You know, and where's the data analyst as part of that too? So with literacy, that's just one measure we're showing there, which is alarming, and there's an urgency to it, and that's why we're going to the Literacy Institute and going to start something more cohesive. So I don't have an answer to you on which is better, which is the need there. I think that it needs more dialogue, quite honestly.
I think also, Candace, is that it's a kind of a, until we get our what you've just heard in place, adding time is not going to be the answer. Because if we're continuing to have time and do the same thing that we've always done, we're going to probably get the same results, even though we're doing it for longer, right? So one of the things that I've been thinking about is that we've had FLES in place for 1 year at pre-K and K. And it was a 5-day program. Working with Adam, we're looking next year at a K1 program and moving that to 3 days a week. I think what we need to do is we need to do a time audit, a pretty careful time audit about how time is being used during the day. How much time are we dedicating to literacy? How much time are we dedicating to math? And is it the same in all grade levels? And then, so work very hard on starting to bring our program. As you probably could tell, if you went to the classrooms in the district and you ask what our basic literacy program is, you would get probably about 42 different answers, right? So we need to work on that. And until that core, that foundation is in place, it's hard to assess what other factors are entering in. You know, what are we doing about SEL? What are we doing about social studies? And are we still continuing to teach those in chunks as opposed to an integrated basis? I think there's a lot of work to do. I think my suggestion would be, let's keep FLES in place for 1 more year, and let's assess it on what it's going to look like as a 3-day program, but determine if that's still even the right model. We don't know. I don't think we know. I don't think there's 100% agreement that that's the right model. Look at it for a year. Get all of these other things starting to generate in place, and then take a real hard look at what the time commitment is going to be going forward, because now you're getting into 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, and the resulting resources that are going to have to be allocated. I think there's still a lot of questions, but we saw from Adam's presentation earlier in the year that we're also starting to see some success. And the outcomes are, while preliminary, the kids are starting to get something. So to the extent that we can build that to be part and parcel of our literacy program, and so they're learning to read or speak or listen in different languages so they can get those kind of standards and benchmarks. I just think it's really very early, but we have to do some kind of a time audit so that we know what's happening and how we're going to use our time, and then set some expectations about what that's going to look like going forward. That would be my take from the cheap seats.
First of all, thank you for all of this work. It's really exciting and it's timely. When do you think, so you did the first assessment, just this one assessment you talked about last year, I'll see it again at the end of this year. After this is implemented, so you're going to be rolling this out in the fall of 17, how long does the transition take? Would you expect to see, if it's working, when do you expect to see a change so that we kind of have a gauge of what the time frame looks like?
Right, so fortunately, I had a meeting today with Dr. Galston, and we had a conversation about strategic plan. And part of a strategic plan, curricular-wise, the part of it is you do outline how long it takes to implement it, evaluate it. So it is articulated in that way. Because it's not the first year, unless there's some magic out there, but I don't believe that that's the case, like, John was saying. But I also wanted to say, when you were speaking, I think a really important part of evaluating, like FLES, for example, not just FLES, time on learning next year, is to get survey feedback from and hear the voice of the teachers, because they're the ones who know, do I have enough time to do this, that, or, that. And certainly parents, but I have a feeling parents will say, I love it, because it's fun to hear you're a kindergartner, but they don't know that, but I'm not able to teach as much, so we'll see if that's the case. I think that's a really important part of it, is the teacher's voice. I was with a kindergarten teacher today at another meeting, and she's feeling, you were there too, very overwhelmed at kindergarten level. Just behavior, it was a social emotional committee meeting, and so just with how to manage behaviors and teach behavior skills and all that, plus whatever. But she loves the plus too, so I think it's good to garner that. John, did you have?
Yeah, just if I could, I want to follow up on the question here on the quick phonics screener. Is that the first year you've used that?
Yep.
So that's a new test.
Yep. On the maze, the QPS, we were using the Founders and Canal benchmark assessment system for years, but those other three were new last year.
Okay. I'm just also trying to understand you have the results on the next slide, kind of 30% needs, 33% approaching. What's the difference between all students and goals?
All students are all the kids
Yep.
in the 3 schools for those grade levels.
Right.
The 600,
Yep.
so 1,007, and then the 600. The 600 are the goal students, which was the goal that the district made in 2015, that students who are gen ed students, not ESL students, and not students with disabilities,
see.
because they
I
have their
see.
own individual goals in there.
I see.
So,
And then I guess the final question, sorry. So the 80% figure that's kind of the tier 1 and kind of the
Yeah.
RTI approach with the pyramid.
yeah.
Isn't that saying like 80% of students should be in the first tier and then 20% are going to be in tier 2 and tier 3? Is that what
Yes.
that's saying?
Yeah, what it's also saying though, Christ, is that the one, the author?
Right.
What it's also saying is that when you, not this one.
That's a whole different, that's a different survey.
He is the author.
That'll be next time.
Lost my train of thought for a sec. So, what he's saying, what he writes about is that when you're using baseline anything, science, social studies, you want to make sure that 80% are scoring well on that, because if only 40% are, maybe that's not the best, curriculum to use. You know what I'm saying? So, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. You're seeing the tier model.
Well, I guess I'm saying these percentages are coming from different places. I mean, the 80% is coming out of a kind of a general approach to the pyramid, saying 80% ought to be in tier 1. Yeah, that's kind of a general idea. Whereas the other percentages are based on the quick phonics screener, the percent that are meets, the percent that are approaching, etc. And they're coming from different places, and so I'm just a little cautious about comparing, because I think the implication here is the 80% is that we ought to have 80% ought to be percent meets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they should.
Well,
These are gen ed students without disabilities
Right.
or a different foreign language.
well, I'm just saying the percentages are coming from different places. So that, in my mind, raises a word of you're using a percent that's used over here in a different way to a percent that's developed through this screening test. That's my point.
I don't understand it that way. I'll look it up for you guys. My understanding of his literature is not the triangle. The triangle is when I was trying to describe how we want everybody, 100% of kids in that bottom rung to have the same teaching, the same instruction, the same curriculum, okay? That's different than this. His 80% is saying anything you're doing, if 80% of your group isn't getting it, just like on IEPs when you write, you need 80% to learn this standard or what have you, then you might want to look at your tool, your instruction, or change your curriculum. So I don't think he's talking about the triangle.
But the quick phonics screener, does that have standards that it talks about what students ought to be at certain levels?
Oh, I'm sure they all have. I honestly, I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they have indicators, each one. Every test, every assessment has them. I can't speak to that.
Okay.
I can certainly get that information. Dari's been
All right.
closest to that. I can certainly get that for you, though.
Okay, thanks.
Science, we'll go through this quickly because I've used this again at the school committee meeting, but the colored ones, blue, orange, and green, represent grade 5, 8, and 10 science scores on MCAS along the last 5 years. And the state are the black corresponding lines to that. So it indicates that the 8th grade in particular, science scores are below the state all the time. And so that shows, not because 8th graders, it's because the program from K through 8 needs more standards-based instruction. So Elizabeth has spent a lot of time this year, and we poking holes and finding where are the gaps. So again, it's not the teachers teaching, it's what they have for their scope and sequence that needs to be perfected. So we entered new life science units this year into a few grades, and next year into more. So we're on it with the new science standards. Teachers have met, and we have a 3-year plan, which is now down to 2 because they've done a lot of work together on this. And we have something called STEM scopes that you'll see for PD that we're spending money on, which is science, very cool, science online, and it uses claim evidence reasoning, but it also has tentacles into literacy. So it's a wonderful kind of tool. So that's the science scores, and this is just what we're doing about it this year. So right now where we're at, what we've done, and then next year, sort of what it looks like. Also, secondary science 6 to 8. This is like their goal that started a couple years ago was a 3-year goal to have the math, science, technology, and engineering standards fully implemented. So as you can see, 6th grade last year did so. This school year, 6 to 8 are completing their science maps, and writing in the content area is a big focus for literacy. And then next year, 7th and 8th grade are going to begin to use what 6th grade already does, the claims evidence reasoning. And then next steps. We met recently, and the science coordinator is just taking a peek at STEM scopes for the 6th to 8th graders, if there's any parts, units that can fit a gap that they have in their standards. So we're looking at all the standards for that. In the summer, teachers are doing project-based learning and making sure all of those projects are standards-based. That, we can pass reading, almost done.
And how about that coordinating between K through 5 and 6 through 12 with science?
How about coordinating that?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the, Lindsay and I talk all the time, we used to be colleagues in the same department. So the big thing is the new frameworks, and the other big thing was that, in K to 2, they didn't have kits, or didn't really have a standard curriculum. So adopting STEM scopes has been great because it's a great curricular resource that, we're still using pieces of the Seeds of Science kit, but grades 1 through 5 now have the same curriculum, and it addresses the new science practices as well. The piece with STEM scopes that will really help bridge the gap, and from between 5 and 6, or elementary school, middle school, is that they have some amazing assessments with every single unit, in particular writing assessments using claim, evidence, and reasoning. The sixth grade teachers do a lot with claim, evidence, and reasoning, and Lindsay was really excited to know that 1 through 5, that's going to be our common science assessment. So I think that that's where we'll see, get a lot of bang for our buck. Yeah, it'll be a good thing.
We also both, at different department meetings this year, had brought in a science ambassador who is a science teacher or coordinator employed in Massachusetts, and they have been trained by DEAS to help classroom teachers learn about and begin implementing the new science standards. So we both had, it wasn't the same person, but we each took advantage of that free PD opportunity for our staff, as well as some additional training that the state has provided for the new standards.
And at the elementary level, we actually spent all of our department grade level time on science. The principals also gave me some half-day time. So I feel like when you look at the budget up there, you saw a lot of math because we made so much headway with science this year.
Do you have consistent material? I feel like we've had something, the teachers have had something, or maybe not something every year, and it's been a little consistent.
So 3 to 5 at Seeds of Science, Roots of Reading hits science units that covered most of the standards 3 to 5. They don't fully align. So STEM Scopes is, I can present on STEM Scopes at another time, but it's aligned to the new science practices. It's research-based. It's out of Rice University. And we spent a lot of time talking to other districts who are using it. It's fairly inexpensive for what we get, and the teachers have been thrilled with it. So now we do have that consistent piece. And the materials that it requires are things that we can easily gather, and I've already purchased them, and consumables that are easy to replace. So this is where we are with that, which is exciting. I also have purchased quite a few literacy texts recently to help teach the new standards, some great classroom books, particularly grade 2, just received a whole bunch of books from me, and they were so appreciative. So I feel like people are in a really good place with science right now.
And you think this is, by the fall, you feel like, will the...
Everybody's teaching a new unit this spring.
They are.
Life science, yeah, every grade level. So grade 1 is going to do STEM Scopes. Grade 2 is doing the DOE model curriculum units, which have to do with habitats. Grade 5 is adding some things around plants from the model curriculum units. Grade 3, yeah, everybody's doing a new unit this year. And then next year, we will knock out physical science and earth science. So we're taking it discipline at a time. Most districts take 3 to 4 years to transition. We started our transition to the new frameworks about a year late, so I'm shortening it.
And have the teachers felt pretty comfortable with the additions and the transition, or have you felt like...
Yeah, we need some more time. I mean, time's always a challenge. I need more time with certain people to plan with them, and then getting all the grade levels together. That's a challenge, but we did an activity at PD recently where people kind of prioritize what they think we need to focus on, and science was like kind of blank because they feel like we really did a great job with it this year with attending to it. So.
The next 2 slides are summer PD. Oh, I'm so sorry.
All right. So in terms of the Seeds of Science program, where you're doing the new, what's it called again? STEM. And you say that it's research-based. Can you just clarify more what you mean that that's an augmentation to a program, or it's a differentiation in some way? There's more lab, or?
Well, so it uses the 5E. So Seeds of Science is also an excellent program that has great results and has given us great results. It doesn't exist for grade 1, and they haven't aligned to the new frameworks. So for that reason, we've picked out the kits that align to the new frameworks. There have been quite a few changes with the new frameworks, and so we're still using those. STEM Scopes is based on the 5 E's, engage, explore. And so what it does is it covers the new standards entirely and integrates the practices, which Seeds of Science does in some places, but not across the board. So now we have something grades 1 through 5 that we can cover everything.
Okay.
Has a nice literacy component too. Yeah.
This slide is the draft of summer PD that was
crafted by the curriculum coordinators and principals, and has everything from Chromebooks, which is on the secondary slide coming up, introducing it. So 6 through 12, all students in our secondary schools will have a Chromebook at their fingertips, to STEM scopes and AP workshops, etc. There's a lot of summer work here. And then the next slide shows professional development for next year, the requests that have been made thus far. And you can sort of read through the whole kit and caboodle. So it's online as well. So secondary budget goals. Laura Alderson Rotundo has done an awesome job at writing grants for engineering, Project Lead the Way, and recently got awarded a huge grant for our district. So it's important just to, a lot of this is going to come from grant money, but the parts that show cannot use grant money, some annual fees, teacher stipends to learn the training. It's 2-week training for high school teachers, and it's 1-week training for middle school teachers. We're going to try to cover in our budget. And Laura, do you want to come sit here in case there's some questions on this at all? You want to give any overview that's a better description than I gave?
Of the whole grant thing?
Just the progression for that has an effect for next year.
Okay, so I applied for grants. You have to apply at each individual school. We received $35,000 in a grant over 3 years for the middle school and $22,500 at the high school.
Great.
So we're going to be expanding at the high school. We already have Project Lead the Way there. We're going to add another 1 course this year and another one in 2 years, but we're also going to use the money to train some teachers so that we have backup teachers, because you have to be trained in order to be able to run the courses. And then at the middle school, probably Chemo is a better person to speak to how this is going to be implemented. We're going to start with 3 new courses. They'll be in the enrichment block. And this year 3, and then 2 more next year, and then 1 the 3rd year. Do you want to talk more about the implementation? He knows the schedule, and I don't.
I guess, what are the courses at the high school and the middle school?
The course modules are still, I think they're being determined. I think we have a number of teachers who are interested, and they're interested in various courses. I think also there's some computer requirements. Some courses have more computer requirements, some courses have less. And so we just need to make sure that the budget fits there. But they're all project-based. They're all really based on STEM subjects. I mean, some of the examples include design and modeling, automation and robotics, computer science for innovators and makers, green architecture, medical detectives. Those are the kinds of course modules, and they fit. They're 45-day course modules, so they fit in a semester enrichment class. And so I think Mr. Loughran will be doing one of the course modules for his enrichment for 7th and 8th graders, and then I'm hopeful that, and it really also depends, I'm still asking teachers and things like that, but I'm hopeful our 6th grade math and science teachers, so we'll have 2 6th grade enrichment courses, and we'll build up from 6th grade up through 8th grade.
And at the high school, we're going to be adding a capstone course for next year. Currently, we have 3 Project Lead the Way courses. The capstone course will be the 4th, and then we'll settle there for a year and do that for 2 years, those 4. And then in the 3rd year of the grant, we will add civil engineering and architecture. So we'll have 5, and I think that's what would be a reasonable place to kind of settle out and see how things are going.
That's great. Does the capstone have any internship component? I know in some districts, Project Lead the Way has an internship component with businesses.
In terms of with the capstone project, or
Yeah.
so there are opportunities to start engaging and having a community organization and businesses that will help us develop an internship program, but it's not part of the curriculum, to my knowledge. It can be in addition to, but it won't be part of the capstone course itself. It's kind of an independent project, and it can be done as a team. It's not just like one student doing a project on their own. but it doesn't include an internship outside of the school as well.
I have a question. For the middle school, would whatever course you pick, would that do work with the maker space? Is that something that is aligned in that way, or do you see that as pretty different?
It could. I mean, what Project Lead the Way does is that they train teachers extensively with their curriculum. Once teachers get trained, and there are always maybe some opportunities to include what we have, and perhaps the makerspace might be one of those opportunities. But really high-quality courses, and it's a pretty intense training session for middle school teachers, a whole week in the summer, focusing on this 45-day course.
At the high school, we do use the Fab Lab in conjunction with some of the projects that we've done.
Thank you.
Going on for secondary, social studies and science are all about textbooks. Replacing old textbooks and moving them around. So this sort of just tells you how expensive textbooks are now, basically. So the big chunk of change going for textbooks. And, excuse me. ELA is, a cool thing is audiobooks, which is very helpful, that the ELA coordinator is organizing for core texts. And Dan is just doing some projectors, and that's all we got right now for math for next year. So those are just budget drivers, not that they're not doing anything, but those are just things that affect the budget. And then K to 12 budget goals. Tony is up and going, so that will have expanded the one-on-one to all secondary students. So that's grades 6, 11, and 12 next year. Pretty huge. And then Megan has done magic in creating a position where a shared person is going to go to several different schools, but increase the opportunity for more music and performance-based classes, which is very exciting there. And also a middle school choral accompanist, because when you have these huge, wonderful choruses and one teacher with 70 kids, it's hard to play the piano and manage all that, so that's in the budget as well. Finally, the last thing on here is what was mentioned also in the first slide, and that's the district data and assessment specialist. And basically, it's someone who will work with tech and work with the instructional leaders, the curriculum coordinators, the principals, and one is that committee I mentioned last a little while ago that we'll have next year, the one for data management assessment system. That person also will be critical in co-facilitating that with me to figure out with a bunch of teachers what is the best system for us going forward. But in the meantime, that person will be working with what we have. We've had a long turnaround on the data from June 2016 till now, because one person's trying to do a bunch of stuff for literacy. But that's not as helpful to us now. We need stuff that turns around quickly. So Mary also had shared with us how successful this position has been in her district in helping teachers to use that data right away. Also, analyzing with all of us the MCAS down to the point much more of if it's science and it's 8th grade and we're looking at it, what part are we not teaching is that demonstrating we're not teaching enough of. So she or he in this position is going to come together with the math specialist, with our curriculum coordinators. And one more thing that's not on here because it doesn't affect the budget is the literacy coordinators is retiring this year. So next year what we've decided to do is have a K-5 literacy coordinator / Title I coordinator. And the reason for this is many of the conferences for Title I that I have gone to this year, I'm sitting with the Title I coordinator, not the assistant super, and I've realized, oh my God, that's how they do this, because it's an we get a lot of funds from Title I, but I'm not sure they're being used to the best service for kids in our district. And if we focus it from the high school to elementary, which is our goal next year, we'll get more bang for our buck. And we have money to use there. The literacy specialist will be focused on that. So actually he or she will be doing double duty right there, because the Title I will also be incorporated into what we're doing for literacy. So,
Can I ask a follow-up?
yeah, please.
So There'll be a K to 5 ELA coordinator.
No, literacy.
I'm sorry, literacy. And that same person will also do district-wide
Yes.
Title I.
Yeah, because Title I, right now is in the middle school and high school. But research shows, and my experience has been, if you have it in the elementary schools, you make much more progress for students at an earlier age and then less need for it, right, in high school. So, but there's a lot of data that goes into that. What percent of each school is low income or economically disadvantaged, excuse me. You know, all of that goes into that, so I'm not sure where we'll start it, but I know we'll be able to go at least to one in elementary, so that'll kind of focus. And that's the basic chart on salaries and then non-salary. What I did, when you see like big switches, let's take text and materials across there. It was 30,000, and now it has a 13,000 negative there. It says negative 143. It's shifted. Why is that not in there? I don't think about it. Oh, because we took it out of schools. Okay. So what we did is we took the PD. There was one fund called Contracted Services and it had like $92,000 in it, and you could only be used for certain things. And I'm like, why is all that money there? And so what we did, Mary and I, is shifted it to a bunch of the different categories so you can use it for various things, like conferences, like PD, stipends, etc. So some of these numbers, they're absurd, like where it says secondary, 575% increase. It just went from $500 to $3,300 for needs at the elementary level. So it's not like they look absurd, but they're really not absurd. It's just sort of moving it around. What we really focused on, which is a good thing, is increasing site-based management and autonomy for principals, and we put professional development line item in each principal's budget so that they can decide certain different needs that are maybe not district-wide, but something that they want to spend money on. So that's, you'll see that on Wednesday night, separate from this. So we moved some of the funds there as well. Questions on curriculum? Nothing like curriculum at 8 o'clock on a first night of spring, right? Woohoo! Oh, Eileen?
It's not exactly a question, but because Dr. Brackett won't be here next year, I just want to say I really like the idea of figuring out whether we're being as effective as we can be in all areas before trying to say, well, if we just had more time, we'll take this out, we'll take that out. Let's really see if we're using the time that we have really well before we start just pulling pieces out and saying, we'll just do the same thing more. I 100% am on board with that.
Mm-hmm. Or adding more things in, too.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, you're gonna help me with this too. All right, so student services, major functional areas. Again, Kathy Damaris, the Director of Special Education, recently changed title to Director of Student Services. So special education is obviously a major functional area under there. We have directors, coordinators, team chairs, related service providers, special education teachers and instructional assistants. We have a behavioral health and social emotional support overseen by Dr. Kordich, who's here this evening, and myself. We've got, so under there's guidance counselors, school psychologists, social workers, BCBAs, behavior specialists, nursing services. Again, this year that has been under Donna Rusakis, so she's here as well tonight. And English language learners, Yvonne is here. And then there's out-of-district tuition and transportation are all areas that we'll touch upon. Okay, that didn't help here. Thanks. Is that it? Nope, that's not it. So it's the down button?
Yeah.
Down button. Yeah. This is just a quick demographic picture from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Looking at our students whose first language is not English across our schools as compared to the state, our English language learners as compared to the state by school, students with disabilities, high needs, and economically disadvantaged. And then this is the numbers. This is to like as of Friday. We pulled this data off of the district data system, which is called Easy IEP. and just how many students with disabilities by school, and I see a typo. The middle school, that should be 117. That's a big difference, so I apologize for that. That's my typo. So I'm glad I happened to see that. But the other ones look like they're accurate. This is a breakdown of students by disability category from 2016 Department of Education data. Something that I found very interesting, because we talk a lot about the Perkins effect and the Perkins School for the Blind being located here in Watertown. There are 0 students in 2016 that were categorized with the Department of Education as primary disability of being visually impaired. So I think that's just something to kind of be thinking about. So just some of the things that kind of helped frame the work that we did this year, and some of the things that we're looking at towards planning budget for FY18. There were program reviews that were handed to me on a platter. When you come in as a new director, usually that's the first thing you plan to do, and to kind of sit back and study and learn. But I was given kind of 2 roadmaps. There was the RSM report. Did I get it right that time, Mary? All right, I always say RMS, I think the sports goods store. And then the ECHO report as well. So some commendations. Parents feel the district delivers high quality services. We have a continuum of services for students for a range of disabilities. Strong central office and building level administrative support for students with disabilities. And transitions from level to level and to post-secondary experiences were found to be a strength in those reports. Both recommended the following: that we review our pre-referral procedures. So before we get into special education, before we're testing, what are we doing under general education? And also our DCAP, which is the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan. Reviewing our substantially separate programs, entrance and exit criteria and curriculum. Reviewing the role and the training of our evaluation team chairpeople. And reviewing the use of high-cost contracted services. And reviewing how we use instructional assistants in the district. I also took into account parent feedback. Thank you, CPAC officers who are here this evening, Ellen Bay, Maria, Aya. Held a meeting in November that was administrators not welcome. They wanted to have an open and honest discussion where parents felt free to speak. And so they did provide me some notes and highlights from that event in November. So strengths that were found to be a great CPAC, I have to agree with that. Strong preschool program, dedicated teachers in the district, Connections program for students on the autism spectrum was said to be a strength based on parents. Supportive guidance department and good professional development. Areas that the parents said were in need of improvement. We had a high rate of turnover in administration. Scheduling meetings was found to be challenging. Documentation was lacking, inaccurate reports. Lack of communication, IEP meetings being disorganized, parent input not feeling valued, outside evaluations not valued, and then programming lacking for certain populations. And then there's the new director's kind of 8-month perspective, although I'm realizing it's coming upon 9 months. So I also concur, we have extremely dedicated and caring teachers, support staff, and administrators, a very active and supportive CPAC. I find overall parents in this district are very involved, very informed, and eager to work cooperatively with us in the district. And this last bullet is something that's really kind of an overarching theme for me and something to keep in mind. That maintaining high-quality special education services in a fiscally responsible manner is a shared goal amongst all of our stakeholders. Some of the accomplishments this year, we had built new preschool classrooms that opened at the Phillips. That inspection took place just timely for us to have the preschoolers start on time, and those classrooms are beautiful. We hired 2 duly licensed teachers for the language-based program at the Watertown High School. So duly licensed meaning they both have their certificates in content area. One is English and one is science. And they also have the licensure as special educators 5 through 12. We provided comprehensive training to all 7 of our evaluation team chairs through the Accept Collaborative. Linda Waters, who does a great training, she was the special education director in Wellesley. She has since retired. That was 3 full days of training for our evaluation team chairs. We had teams of general education teachers and special education teachers from every building, all 5 of our buildings, that attended training on inclusive practices in January of 2017 with Lisa Deeker.
And we have adopted, I would say, in a pilot version, the Autism Curriculum Encyclopedia, or ACE curriculum, published by the New England Center for Children, primarily for our students in our Connections program. Early Steps preschool accomplishments, and Karen Feeney, I didn't give you a shout out, she's here, this evening, the director. So she spearheaded development of a comprehensive mission statement for Early Steps, creation of a pre-referral process, which is the GET, the General Education Team, which had been missing from Early Steps, the development of a tiered system of supports, and an IEP process checklist that were developed for staff reference. I know I'm talking very fast. Any questions so far? So goals for fiscal year 18, huge. We talked about the achievement gap when we were listening to Dr. McGinnis speak, and we're kind of, piggybacking on that. And how do we do that? Really increasing and improving inclusion opportunities, enhancing collaboration between general education teachers and special education teachers, providing professional development for general education teachers, special education teachers, and instructional assistants. It's focused on increasing academic achievement for all students, including our students with disabilities, and assuring that instruction for students with disabilities is provided by licensed professionals. Improved trust and communication continues to be a goal and an area for growth. So continue work with the Watertown CPAC with our department. Parent forums, we're planning to begin in the spring. I think I'm going to do a copycat of Dr. Brackett's coffees. Like a morning and an afternoon type of session, and also looking at putting together some specific parent forums for particular groups, like a transition fair for your secondary parents whose children are looking at their next journey after leaving our school system, or turning 3 for parents who are with the early intervention systems, and that's a scary time, and what's that going to be like when I'm going to cross the threshold into the public schools. Continuing to build the district webpage for special education. Tony Carlson, where are you? Thank you very much. Tony's been helping tremendously, so we're slowly building our directory. We just put an announcement up this weekend for information about our extended year programming dates, so that parents have that more timely than I've heard that they've had it in the past. So we're getting there, but it's still a work in progress. And then sharing staff and student successes through Dr. McGinnis's Teaching and Learning newsletter. We're going to talk a little bit about least restrictive environment, because this is one of the things that's kind of driving some of the budget recommendations that you'll be seeing. So just a quick screen about definitions. When we say full inclusion, it means that students with disabilities are participating 80% or more of their day in the general education classroom setting with non-disabled peers. Partial inclusion, 41 to 79% of their day is in that gen ed setting with non-disabled peers. And our substantially separate settings are where students are segregated over 60% or more of their school day in separate settings without students that don't have disabilities. Why does it matter? I have some literature on the back table. It's kind of hard to get to, but I do have several articles that I'll kind of refer to. So Dr. Thomas Hare was commissioned by the state of Massachusetts to do some comprehensive program reviews of how are we doing as a state in special education. And his research is pretty compelling and demonstrates that higher academic achievement correlates very strongly with increased access to general education classroom. The district data that we're going to peek at within the next few slides correlates. It shows this trend holds true as well within the Watertown Public Schools. So this is just a good visual, I think, from Dr. Thomas Hare's research. So this is MCAS scores and placement for students with what he calls high incident disabilities. So these are not our students with significant, autism disorders or significant intellectual disabilities. These are students with milder disabilities. So specific learning, communication, and health were included, and then he looked at their students' scores compared to where they happen to be placed. And this, again, is across the whole state of Massachusetts. So if you look at the full inclusion, how do I do the pointing?
The middle one.
The middle one. Oh, look at me. Okay. So included, so the students, these are raw scores, and it tells you what they correlate with. So we're here when we're fully included. We go to that partial inclusion model, and we can see the decrease. Oh, by the way, blue is non-free and reduced lunch and this is free and reduced lunch, so you can kind of see that difference there. And then when we go to the substantially separate settings, you can just see that kind of steady, decline. And these are students with similar abilities, the milder disabilities as well. And then this is, I think, quite the compelling slide to kind of contemplate. So this is Watertown MCAS by placement from the years 2012 to 2016. So this line is your students without disabilities. And this line is our students with disabilities who are fully included. This line is our students with disabilities who are partially included, and just look at that difference there. And then that bottom line is our students who are in substantially separate settings. And we'll see in a slide, it's a very small number of students that we have in our substantially separate programs in Watertown. So this represents a smaller number of students that do tend to have our more significant disabilities. So I think that this is really the compelling story right here, is that gap.
And this is for ELA?
This is overall.
Overall.
It's overall.
So it's combining ELA and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Why was there such a big jump in 2016 for the blue line?
Well, that's actually good news. I think that showed that we'd had some achievement gap narrowing. So why, did we do that? I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I have
And
to
it's
say.
not just a small N? I'd love to think it's not.
So in terms of the numbers that took it, I don't have that in my head. I'd have to look back at that. But again, this would be grades 3 through 10, students with disabilities.
Yes, okay,
So that's
so it's
kind
a
of-
good chunk.
It is. It would be in the hundreds, I would say. Right? Is that right, Mary?
Yes. Your N is 576 on the plan slide, so yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. And just kind of an anecdote, this was something I heard when I was coming on board through the hiring process. There was a parent, I think she's here tonight somewhere. She gave me permission to quote her and call her out, at this presentation. But something that Michelle Flanagan had kind of said to me, in this room, as a matter of fact, she asked about inclusion. Whoops, what did I do? She asked about inclusion and, my philosophies, and she said, I'm all for inclusion. I want my child included, like, all the way through her experience. And she said, we're not raising our daughter at home in a separate room. And I said, I'm taking that one with me. And I did, and I'm here displaying it for you to see. And she also emailed me when I requested the permission to kind of quote her. She said, each and every day that she, meaning Grace, her daughter, she lives and breathes our family life. She's with us at all times, and while we have to make adjustments, it's so worth it. We are preparing her for life in a bigger community. I think that beautifully illustrates kind of my philosophy about inclusion as well. So thank you for that, Michelle and Grace. So inclusion benefits children without disabilities just as much as it does students with disabilities, and I have an article to that effect also in the back. And then this line, I forget whether I stole it from Dr. Hare or Dr. Gian Greco, but disability is simply another form of human diversity. So when we're talking about embracing diversity, that's the same is true for disabilities, for any other form of diversity. So with all of that said about inclusion and the really compelling data in terms of the impact on student achievement, this was a very interesting trend that I was not expecting to find when I reviewed district data from the Department of Education. And I forgot to put that was the source. This is from the Department of Ed. So over the past decade, the blue line shows students, percentage of students who are fully included. So percentage of students with disabilities fully included in Watertown. That blue line, the trend line is following that blue line. So over 10 years, we've actually declined to the point where the state goal for districts is to meet the 60% of our students with disabilities bar, and we started above that. But as you see, we actually ended up below that benchmark. So that's a trend that kind of was curious to me, and started to explore. You might want to ask why. Why is that? And one of the first theories that a lot of us came up with was that perhaps those students are going to. It's because we opened programs. I'm actually going to jump a slide. So, but when we look here, the green line. So this is just Watertown, the state isn't here. The green line is our substantially separate, which has stayed fairly flat. The trend line there is fairly flat. Same is true for our pink is out-of-district placements. So there's some ups and downs, but it's kind of fairly flat. So really, the story there is this red line, which is partial inclusion. So the students that are no longer fully included, they're being pulled out more. And I found that I discovered that anecdotally, going through schools, being in schools, actually being a sub for a couple of days in a school, where I was finding that it's just a typical model that our special educators have kind of small spaces, that they are bringing a couple kids to, for 30 minutes of math instruction, 45 minutes of reading instruction, and they're kind of coming in and out of that classroom regularly during the school day. And same is true for our related services. So we're working with 1 to 2 children at a time, and they're kind of in and out. It's like the gen ed classrooms become a bit of a revolving door, to an extent. And we're not seeing a lot of our special educators that are kind of pushing in and doing work alongside general education teachers in inclusive settings. There are pockets where that's happening. The Hosmer, Bob's out. I don't know if he can hear me. He's waving. I think he could. So Bob has a couple of classrooms that are all day co-taught. So there's one general education teacher, one special education teacher. And we're looking at increasing that kind of model, or more of the push-in to happen. So that's.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are you noticing any specific grades where it's more concentrated, or it's just like across the board?
So that's a great question. So typically, I find that there's more pullout that starts to happen in the upper grades. But off the top of my head, I don't have percentages for you. I can picture where they are on my desk, so I can get that information.
Like a general idea, but you're thinking like above grade.
I do think it begins here at the elementary level, okay? But I could get that separated out by level for you, or even by grade, so I can get that level of detail.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to give bad
I don't need
information.
that level.
Okay.
Like there is,
Yeah.
you did notice.
Yeah, and I would say that that's not unique to Watertown. I do think that it's not unusual for our secondary educators to kind of find that more challenging. How do I include? And I think Shirley's in the room. We talk about how our content area teachers can get very protective of kind of the content. And how does that look? How do we do co-teaching? But we have started at the high school. We have a couple of success stories happening there as well. So there's a couple of pockets where we've piloted. We're really going to look at investing in kind of having more of those experiences, so we have those outcomes that we want for all of our students. Any other questions about those graphs? So some of the challenges that we faced in FY17, we have had increases in our out-of-district placements. Currently, we're at 12% of our students. The number there is 62, compared to 7% in fiscal year 15. So that all results in unanticipated tuition and transportation costs. We started the year with a greater number of paraprofessionals, at 129.5. So there were more of our non-licensed staff than there were of our licensed staff, which is about 70, supporting students with disabilities. And then we've talked a lot about our achievement gaps. We kind of speculated, I don't have all the answers, but some possible contributing factors to increase in out-of-district placements. Recent rapid turnover in administration. It's not unusual for folks to kind of say, oh, there's a newbie, there's a new person in town, I'm going to try and kind of push here. A belief among stakeholders, particularly external folks. I have not found this to be the case amongst our in-district folks, which is refreshing. But a belief that segregated settings are better than in-district programs. I've seen this in particular with educational advocates. That's been one of my biggest pushes and drivers. And second biggest, I'd say, is the state agency phenomenal. So Department of Children and Families, for example, kind of looking at a child in need and thinking they need a residential placement, not for educational reasons, but really kind of pushing us to alleviate their financial burden by engaging in cost sharing with them. And then a big driver is the lack of in-district programming for children with emotional disabilities and behavioral challenges at the elementary level. So this pie chart shows elementary students that were placed out of district by program type. So this was for last fiscal year, and then so far this fiscal year are new outplacements. And The big piece there, the red, is these were students who were placed into settings that specialize in emotional behavioral challenges. This slice is autism, this slice multiple disabilities, and this slice was settings that specialize in serving students with intellectual disabilities. So you can see that that's a big driver. Special education transportation, I didn't put the total cost for FY18, it is at the back in your detail sheets. And I think the number, and Mary's going to tell me if I'm wrong with this, but $1,321,981. So, yeah, about 13, I'm sorry, but, yeah, 1,000,003. So this kind of gives details about how much that, how do we get to that number. So we use a collaborative transportation company, EdCo and Lab. It helps reduce costs, but it does depend on ridership. So as of December 2016, we had 46 riders to placements as close as Watertown and as far as Boxborough and Chelmsford. The average cost per day per rider was $86.94. The median was $75.38. Our range was a low of $41.13. And the highest cost per pupil was $198.90 per day. And then all but 9 riders were shared trips. So 9 were kind of, we call it singletons, and those tend to be more expensive. And so if we have just one student in the region that's going to a setting, we can't end up sharing that ride. And then in-district transportation, so students who, because of their disabilities, need to be transported to school. Within Watertown Public Schools, the average cost, and this is a very rough average, was $40 per pupil. Any questions about that? Looking at paraprofessional support, again, I referred to Dr. Michael Giangreco, who has a lot of articles regarding paraprofessional supports. One of them is printed in the back for you. His work actually drove the Department of Education to put out a technical advisory regarding the use of one-to-one paraprofessionals. So this is information that we're sharing with parents, we're sharing it with our professional staff, our evaluation team chair people, so that they're aware of what the research says about use of one-to-one paraprofessionals, so that when we're having that conversation at an IEP team meeting, we've addressed all of these potential detrimental effects that can take place, and kind of that cost-benefit analysis of if we're going to recommend this service, and if so, how will we plan to fade that support? Because we know that when we go into adult life, we don't have one-to-one supports. So that is also on the back table, the technical advisory. And then this is really important here. By regulation, the work of paraprofessionals must be directed and overseen by licensed professional staff, which is very difficult to do when you have more of the non-professional than you have of the professional staff. Another challenge that still kind of trying to work this out, so these are just some examples, but we have a lot of part-time staff in Watertown, and I think that small districts will often hire somebody at a part-time level when they have a little bit of need that doesn't quite justify a full-time position. But what I found as I was getting a handle on our FTEs was that we have like type of positions we have multiples that are working part-time. So one example in the world of speech language, and these aren't all of the examples, this is just some of them. We have a 0.6 FTE, a 0.5 FTE, and a 0.4 FTE, all equaling 1.5 FTE. For our physical therapists, we have 2, and they each work as a 0.75 FTE. In our CODAs, we have 3 of our CODAs, our Certified Occupational Therapy Assistants, working part-time at 0.6, which equaled 1.8 FTE. And what I found is that there's implications for continuity services for children. Participation in PD and IEP team meetings is challenging, and accessibility for building staff for consultation. An example in speech, I needed to pull the speech language pathologist together for a meeting. Barbara Stewart helped get that on the books for me, and it was a Friday, and there were 3 out of 13 of our staff members who don't work on Fridays, and so they weren't able to be there to kind of hear that important information. So that's something that we looked at. So staffing recommendations that we're looking at is going to look like a lot, but you're going to see that there's also offsets, so that the proposals that we made in special education, at least for the in-district programming, were actually budget neutral. So we were looking at one FTE teacher to open the ISP, or Integrated Support Program. That's our students with emotional and or other disabilities who require a structured therapeutic classroom. So this was something that was put into the budget for this fiscal year. Space issues didn't allow it to happen, but with some help from from the Lowell acting principal, we've identified space at the Lowell where we'll be able to form this classroom. So to support that, a behavior specialist. We were looking to add a special education teacher to support inclusion at the Lowell, to really have, it's one per grade, correct? Okay. A behavior specialist to support connections at the Hosmer, so somebody really to help oversee. We have a large cadre of IAs that are supporting connections, so somebody to help with kind of the behavioral oversight. 2 special education teachers to support inclusion at the high school. What I found in looking at the table of organization is that primarily our inclusion at the high school is being supported through paraprofessionals. So we didn't have dedicated professional staff that were overseeing the inclusion supports. We need a connections teacher at the high school to support increased enrollment. So there's kind of a big bubble of students from the connections that are leaving 8th grade and entering the 9th grade. And then we're looking to have a transition specialist to run the LEAP program for students 18 to 22, and to do some consultation for Watertown High School special education students, teachers, and guidance counselors in transition planning. So we have a teacher that's running the LEAP program currently, but we don't have someone with that transition specialist endorsement, and it's a pretty specialty area, so we're looking at that. Some of our budget offsets, we looked very closely and carefully at related services. And we conducted not just a caseload analysis and comparison of caseloads across kind of the state and the nation, but we also looked at workloads. And workloads is very, very detailed, where you literally take all services on an IEP and you dig down to figure out how many people you need in order to provide those services. So we came up with a recommendation to reallocate 0.5 FTE physical therapist, 0.6 FTE occupational therapist, and 3 FTE speech language pathologists. Support personnel, so as instructional assistants, in conjunction with principals, we looked at a reduction of 11.9 FTEs there, and CODA a reduction of 0.8 FTE. A couple last slides. Questions? Comments? I think you tired them out, Dr. McGinnis. We were asked to review the use of the Academy for Physical and Social Development. The cost for clinical services in schools for this fiscal year was $125,000. In trying to analyze the need, I discovered it was difficult to figure out the number of hours of direct services to students that were being provided by licensed professionals. There is a large number of interns that the Academy has coming in, as well as other licensed staff. At the elementary level, we determined that the Academy supports largely used for general education students and training of interns. So we were looking at eliminating the Academy at the elementary level altogether, and our supports can be provided by existing behavior specialists, guidance counselors, and psychologists at that level. We then went into the secondary. And as the EDCO report kind of calls out, there are a very large number of students with counseling services on their IEPs, so that was noted in that report. So we weren't sure we could simply pull the Academy out, but we really kind of looked at this. The contract with the Academy is $115 an hour, and that was 26 hours of service per week at $125,000. If we looked at cutting that in half because we cut the elementary out, it was going to be still, we would get 13 hours at $115 an hour for about $60,000. And it really didn't seem to make sense to spend that money on this contracted service if we could reallocate that money to in-house personnel to provide that, because then we have somebody who's on, with us 32 hours a week, is, more part of, the district and more available to increase the continuity of services. And so that's the recommendation I have in regards, we have in regards to the academy. And the next few pages are the budget details. Everything you wanted to know about special education in 30 minutes or less.
So I have a question. Obviously, there's some of our obvious assessments that will be done to figure out, you know, how these students are doing, how they're achieving given the changes. But what else, what are you thinking of? How will you know that these are, like, what metrics are you going to be looking at over the first few months and over the course of next year to say, okay, this new or a little bit different allocation is the right approach?
I think they're the exact metrics that Dr. McGinnis, described. So I think even when I think about the articulation of a goal where we separated out our students who were ELLs and our students with disabilities, like I have more of a philosophy of all means all. And so all of the investments that we're making in under the gen ed side, if we're increasing our students with disabilities access to those highly qualified content teachers, and then we're going to see their academic achievement increase as well.
So the tide rises all boats, and so that goal was made before we came. So when we have a new superintendent, is to maybe reframe that goal in a way that is aligning with our plans, rather than being separatist, to be all-inclusive.
Yep.
Right?
Go ahead, John.
No, I just a clarification on the budget that you have there. Actually, you have SEL, social emotional learning. Could you that's kind of a new category, and we've talked about that a lot, but in budgets we haven't really had it. So could you tell us kind of what's included in that category?
Sure, and I probably need help. So I'm going to kind of toss it to Mary July.
Yes, we tried to capture some of the interest in SEL and even ELL, what percentage or what portion of our resources are spent. So it includes essentially all of those staff and expenditures that are related to behavioral health. So that includes guidance counselors, school psychologists, social workers, and any of the expenses related to those departments.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, actually. What's the driver, other than right-sizing, looking for efficiencies and being fiscally responsible, which I wasn't expecting to hear in the educational setting, because in the private sector that's code for cutting of staff. Now, as you've presented it here, we're losing aides, we're losing speech and language professionals, and we're losing OT and PT professionals. Who's going to pick up the balance of the caseload that remains or that comes on board? Because if you're not adding, that means the existing people are getting more of a caseload.
So first, I think if we talk about the paraprofessionals, we are adding professional staff to help oversee that work. And in terms of the related services providers, it's a pretty detailed analysis that was done in terms of figuring out kind of the face time with children, and how much there was. And so I think that what happened with those is that their caseloads and workloads were significantly lower than is typical. If you look at nearby districts, if you look kind of across the state, so that what's remaining is still actually very, very doable.
Okay, but you pointed out also that those people were also part-time. So,
Some.
Right. Okay. So I'd like to also know how many BCBAs are currently on staff and how many are supposed to be on staff, because the SPED community fought very hard 8 years ago to get this programming in place that Melmark laid the groundwork for. And now it seems like it's partially being blown up, reallocated, shifted to a new model, and I just would like to know why.
Sure, so the question of BCBAs?
Yes,
So,
and why?
so there's no change in our BCBA.
So we have
level
one.
staffing. So we had a resignation.
Yeah, so we have one.
but budgeted for is 2, and so we are backfilling that.
Okay.
So 2 BCBAs was budgeted for this fiscal year, and that's the same recommendation for next fiscal year is 2 BCBAs, plus the behavior specialist, specifically for connections with the Hosmer.
Okay. Interesting, given all the large numbers that are coming up and the variable of what we don't know is coming in year to year. So that's concerning. Another thing that's concerning is the overall reduction in the number of aides for inclusion programming. I'm just concerned that, you know, a hefty 8th grader with behavioral problems and emotional problems can't cope, and there's no one in that classroom to help that kid get through the issue. So teachers might be at risk.
Yeah, so we are making recommendations that do not reduce services for children. So if there are students that have needs, they would still have access to aides. I think that what we're trying to focus on in terms of instruction is that the instruction is provided by professional staff. And the aides are there to support exactly what you're talking about. If there's a behavioral issue, those kinds of needs. So the reduction of 11.9 is about a 10% reduction. And those were recommendations that were made. You know, that wasn't a number that Kathy Damaris sat, you know, and kind of threw a dart at a dartboard. It was in conjunction with conversations with principals and looking at how we're going to increase achievement for our students, all of our students.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Just want to, kind of informational, do you have, at one point, will we get some more information about the kind of, the trends in terms of the number of students in special education, particularly in district, out of district? Because sometimes we have that kind of information available to us. I don't see that here.
Yeah, I think that was on the graph. Sorry.
Well, that has, you mean the bar graphs?
Correct. And the first one shows you comparisons with the state. It's very busy. So the next couple, I pulled the state out to just focus on Watertown.
Oh, so the out-of-district...
Slide 14 has the out-of-district at 62.
The OOD, or that's out-of-district? No.
Yes. Yes.
OOD is out-of-district?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the number, these graphs are kind of hard. Numbers would be easier to follow, a little bit. The graphs are
Sure.
kind of...
So the graphs came from numbers, so I can get this
Right, they're in an Excel
pretty readily.
spreadsheet. Right.
But you did also have the numbers of students with disabilities listed by school.
Correct. Yeah, we're looking for
With
trend
numbers.
data. Yeah, I think John was specifically asking for trend data over time.
Right.
Whatever last year and this year between that.
Yeah, I mean, district-wide, not so much by school per se, but district-wide.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we see the out-of-district, we also see the Minuteman too, and then the...
Right.
the
Right, and this is
special
not,
Minuteman.
yeah, this is
Right.
specifically
Yep.
disability placements.
Yep.
Yes.
But there's some disability placements to Minuteman, so those are in here.
Those would not be, because at that point, Minuteman becomes the LEA, the lead educational agency. So that would be Minuteman slides.
Okay.
We could certainly tell you how many students attend Minuteman for whom we pay the differential
Right.
because the students are on IEPs.
Right.
Any other questions? All right, did you want to, any closing remarks? We will be here again on Wednesday for the next, at 6 o'clock, Wednesday at 6 o'clock. All right, thank you very much for all of this work. Excellent.